Ford and the Nazis, Part 2, by Humongous. Envision armadas of Ford trucks descending upon Europe and the USSR during World War II. Picture the occupants of these vehicles kidnapping innocents. Visualize these victims being taken to the Ford Werk plant, Ford's German affiliate in Cologne, forced to build trucks for the Third Reich. For Elsa Iwanawa, one of multitudinous individuals abducted by Ford and the Nazis in this fashion, it wasn't necessary to imagine anything, since she lived it. Quote, "They took us by truck to the Ford plant in Cologne. We were just children. We were frightened, calling out for our mothers, crying all the time. At first they told us it would only be for a few months, and then we would go home, but they lied to us. They never let us go. At Ford, we were treated like dogs, thrown into a barracks without any heat, running water, or sewage. It was freezing in the winter. Terrible, just terrible. The bunks had no mattresses, just wooden planks with a little straw, and they only fed us a bowl of cabbage and water broth twice a day with a slice of bread. We were always hungry. I sat all day dreaming about food. If you asked for seconds, they would beat you. I was forced to work from 7 in the morning until 7 at night drilling holes in engine blocks, while the foremen, who were like animals, supervised us. We had no names, only numbers. Whenever a worker got sick, they took them away. We later heard they were shot. If we didn't meet our quota, we were beaten." Unquote. Robert Schmidt, company manager of the Ford Werk plant in 1942, asserted, quote, "It depends upon our work whether the front can be supplied with its necessities. Therefore, we too are soldiers of the Führer." Unquote. Well, that's not distressing, nor the type of quote you'd expect to hear from somebody working on Toby Keith's pickup. Maybe the Ford Truck Man video should feature assembly line workers being executed and a swastika replacing the Ford logo on Mr. Keith's guitar. Nazi armaments minister Albert Speer promised to provide 12,000 concentration camp prisoners for the German auto industry, which he asserted was crucial to the success of the Third Reich. As such, Buchenwald, an infamous incarceration facility, sent a continuous cascade of detainees to Ford Werk throughout the war. One may squabble Ford was coerced by the Third Reich to use slave laborers. They'd be wrong. Ford purchased these incarcerates by choice. What's more, Ford employees could have treated these captives any way they desired. As it was, they decided to abuse them. When Allied military finally overran the Ford Werk plant, it was ascertained most of the Russian female slaves had contracted venereal diseases, indicating they'd been raped by the Ford employees. Keep singing, Toby! Imagine how shocked American soldiers must have been hitting the battlefield only to be met by Third Reich battalions driving Ford vehicles. More than 30% of the Nazi regime's trucks had been produced by Ford. According to a 1945 U.S. Army report, quote, "Ford increasingly resorted to use of prisoners of war and other slave labor. The foreigners employed rose to over 40% of its labor supply in 1944. The usual Nazi discriminations in wages and working conditions were practiced." Unquote. Even though other American corporations in Germany were seized by Hitler's Third Reich after the U.S. entered the war, Ford Werk was left to continue operations unhindered. In fact, profits were safeguarded in private accounts so Ford could collect them following the culmination of the bloodshed. Henry himself was awarded the Nazi Grand Cross of the Order of the German Eagle, reserved for, quote, "foreigners who have been of special service to the Reich," unquote. And what did Elsa Iwanawa receive? According to this kidnapped slave laborer, she was never paid by Ford Werk. Rather, in 1995, she was provided a free tour of the plant as it stood then, and given a small Ford commemorative pin as compensation. As an addendum, Ford Werk produced the turbines used in Nazi V-2 rockets, which were responsible for the deaths of thousands of innocent British civilians. The V-2 was invented and developed by Wernher von Braun, a Nazi Party member who subsequently became the head of NASA and the father of the U.S. space program.